Mother's Little Angels, written by Davi May, narrated by Faiza Muhammad Arua. Chapter 1. Fear the Blood Moon. A cry of anguish rang out across the valley, silencing the dawn chorus of creature chatter. No! Another blood moon? I am cursed! Damn it! Shit! Useless, seedless, no good, dry humping men! The outburst stirred awake those villagers still sleeping. Men looked up from their steaming cookpots and animal pens, and then dropped their heads again, making themselves as inconspicuous as possible. Women either went back to sleep in their huts or carried on preparing for the day's hunt. Some shared looks of resignation. Chief Jabo, her voluptuous lungs the source of the yelling, emerged from the high cave, her ebony face wearing a thunderous expression. She shook her fist at the sky and flicked menstrual blood from her fingers in disgust. "Where's my fucking club?" White teeth flashed in an angry snarl. She kicked the remnants of last night's dinner around the fire pit and brushed thick dreadlocks from her face, scanning the debris for her weapon. Ziba looked up from where she sat cross-legged, weaving a cloak from strands of soflax. Here we go again, she thought, before placing her work to one side and standing. Only 12 hands tall at most, her head would reach Jabo's chest, but what she lacked in height she made up for in diplomacy, and she'd have to call on that skill now to save a poor man from a thorough beating. The chief found her club. She strode down the slope in front of the cave, swinging it into an open palm. It made a very satisfying thwack as polished wood does on flesh. Big bare breasts bounced with each stride. Powerful thighs rippled, and trickles of blood running down the inside of them, unnoticed. The only item of clothing, a skirt of river reeds, swished around her wide hips, in time with the thwacking of the club. Ziba met her before she reached the man's cage. She drew herself up and still found she was only addressing one of her hot-headed chief's nipples. "Look, I know you're angry, Jabo, but you can't go whacking him around. We'll swap him, okay? I'll go with Sulan to the slave markets, but if you beat him up, we won't get a good swap." "That's what you said last time, Ziba." The chief stared into the face of her weaver. "I'm thinking you'd be best sticking to your knitting. And what does idiot Sulan know about men? She thought he..." Jabo waved her club at the cage behind Ziba. "Looked handsome. Ha! Mother God, I hate these useless men." She looked at the sky again. "Why, oh why did you give them the baby seed, mother?" "I'm sure the mother knew what she was doing," Ziba consoled. "Look, you go back and rest. You know the blood moon makes you tired. Sulan and I will take this one back to the market. If we leave now, we could be back by sundown." The chief calmed, but not before spitting at the pathetic male cowering in the corner of his cage. "Yes, well, okay. There's no hurry anyway. No use me fucking another one until after this blood moon. But for mother's sake, bring me back a cedar this time. Don't just go by the size of the cock, or how pleasing Sulan thinks they look. Find out if they've seeded before, at least. And don't let those crafty bitches rip you off again." Maybe I should go myself. Remember what happened last time you went to the markets? But anyway, a chief of your standing shouldn't have to demean themselves by haggling, Ziba said. She decided not to mention that even the most aggressive of negotiations shouldn't end up with the buyer threatening to cut the seller's tits off. Chief Jabo grunted and strode up the slopes to her cave, swinging her clubs and cursing under her breath. Ziba sighed and packed her weaving work into her hut. She summoned her slave to find Sulan the hunter. The smell of breakfast wafted through the village as the men finished their cooking and presented it to the women. Most huts enjoyed toasted ash cakes of sourdough bread, dipped in thick barley porridge, sweetened with fruits, or some variants thereof. The short, plump cook Dilha had trained everyone's slave well, and this morning she didn't even have to administer a single cuff around the ear for burnt bread. Ziba and Sulan grabbed a quick bite and told their slaves to eat the rest for a quick treat. The two headed off, Ziba in her soft flax tunic and a light feather shawl, Sulan in her rabbit hide hunter's grab, a small stone axe on one hip and their water skin on the other. They towed the naked, ungilded but infertile slave behind them, his hands bound tight, a loose length of flax connecting his ankles, allowing only small strides, but should he try to run or fight, he'd make a poor show of it. Sulan, tall, lean, and muscular from running on the hunts, seemed excited. Once they turned a few corners of the forest trail, she whispered to Ziba, "When we stop for rest, I'll have him. You keep watch, okay? And then you can have a turn." "Sulan, you know that's forbidden. What if his seed takes root inside you? The first baby of the 10-year will be yours, not the chief's, or even one of the breeders. Next thing I weave will be your funeral cloak." "His seed's no good, remember? The chief had him every day for a month, and she still got the blood moon. And anyway, dummy, I'll just get off him before he spits his seed in me. It's easy if you know how." "Listen to you, the expert on men now, eh?" Ziba chuckled. "Just how many men have you had, anyway? Should we call you Sulan the Breeder?" As a hunter, Sulan outranked Ziba, but it was a gray area. Ziba was twice her age of 20 winters, so the two traded barbs in relative comfort. "Well, he'll be the lucky first," Sulan conceded and turned to look at their captive. He shuffled along behind them, head down, placing each footstep so as not to trip on the flax binding. "If I wasn't so good at hunting, I would have been a breeder." "You? With those skinny hips of yours? Ha! No, you wouldn't. If you weren't a hunter, you'd be with me, weaving." "I've tried with my slave, you know," Sulan said, ignoring the insult about her hips. She stopped to move an extra thick branch to the side and hold it while the smaller zebra and the slave passed. "But no balls, no club." Sulan clenched her fist and grabbed her forearm in the traditional sign of the breeders. "Still worth a try, though. Mosh told me that in the village she came from, they had a deballed man-slave whose cock could still go hard. Imagine!" "Well, Mosh says a lot of things," Ziba replied as they broke through the thicker vegetation and found the trail again. "We should call her Mosh the Storyteller." You hunters don't come this way much? The trail keeps disappearing." "We don't. We take a fresh way every time. Otherwise, the animals will get wise." Weaver, hunter, and ungelded man continued through the forest. The day grew humid and small insects buzzed them, attracted by their sweat. The man complained of thirst. At the next clearing, they stopped. "They speak so weirdly," Sulan noted as she operated a water skin and poured half into the man's open mouth. "Too fast for him. So much spilled down his front. He is handsome, though." She admired the male as he tried to lick water droplets from his chin. "Skinny and tough looking, like me." "He's skinny because we never feed them too much. Least they get strong. And he sounds weird because they're only taught the basics. You know it's forbidden to teach them more, just as it's forbidden to fuck the chief's man-slave, which is what I presume you're about to do." Ziba replied as Sulan pulled the slave's loincloths off him and shoved her own rabbit hide skirt up over her waist. "He's not the chief's, though. Because we're selling him, right?" she reasoned, pushing her quarry down to the ground with a firm hand to his shoulder. "Yes, but we haven't sold him yet," Ziba sighed and sat down against the tree. "So, don't hurt him, and for mother's sake, don't let him spit his seed in you." "Yes, oh wise weaver Ziba," Sulan laughed. "Mosh says you have to play with them for a bit, you know, to get them hard. Is that right?" "Seems reasonable." Ziba watched, somewhat interested, as Sulan leaned over the man and fiddled with his cock. He stared straight up, almost frozen. She wondered if he felt caught between fear and arousal. Sulan looked rather attractive. Her smooth black skin glistened with the perspiration of her own arousal. She arched her spine, almost as if offering pert young breasts and hardening nipples to the mother herself. The man couldn't avert his eyes any longer. Ziba found she couldn't avert hers either. For a second, she felt sorry for him, and all men. But then she remembered the legends of times past, thousands of winters ago, when men had ruled with iron fists and destroyed the world, until the mother arrived and delivered the world from men's evil. It all sounded fanciful, but still scary. Everyone knew that men could gain a physical strength that surpassed women, if left with their balls. There was a logic behind the legends. She couldn't imagine living in those ancient times, though. Imagine men being able to overpower women. What must life have been like? Horrible. No, the only reason to risk a man gaining strength by leaving his balls attached was to use him for breeding. First with the chief, to ensure the chiefdom line, and then with the tribe's breeders. But after, off with those evil balls. Gelded men became somewhat safe and useful. She liked her own slave, apart from being a reasonable cook and hut keeper. He was also adept at finding the best flax and vines for her weaving. Sulan's grunting interrupted Ziba's daydream, and she looked over at her friend, squatted astride the man, his cock hard and buried between her low lips. Sulan bounced herself up and down on it, her face contorted in pleasure. She paused her grunting to update Ziba. "I got him. Hard, she gasped. It feels fantastic. Look, he even helps sometimes. She ran out of breath. Ziba looked. Sure enough, the man-slave was doing his best to push his hip up against Sulan's butt cheeks. You're crazy, you know that? Ziba laughed. Sulan reached down and rubbed her mother's spot. Her grunts grew louder and closer together. Just don't let him, Ziba warned, but was interrupted by the man crying out. Something about how he would burst, and then his hip spasmed, once, and then again, like a rabbit's legs when you chop its head off. Oh shit! Sulan shouted, Shit! He's spat seed inside me! She hopped off him as if he were a hot fire pit under her ass and jumped up and down, like she was performing some pre-hunt exercise routine. Get out, shit! After a time, her efforts were rewarded by a small dribble of seed escaping from between her low lips. How much seed do they spit? More than that? She asked Ziba, who watched the entire performance from the base of her tree with mild amusement. I don't know. Perhaps you should ask Mosh. Ziba couldn't resist the jibe. She had predicted this from the start. Sulan spent until mid-sun trying to empty herself of man's seed. She used their remaining water, rinsing between her legs. She also convinced Ziba to look inside her, but light was dim this far under the tree canopy. Ziba could only report that she couldn't see much. The man seemed more droopy after that, and the going was tough through the thick forest. Sometime later, they heard the coursing of water and the hustle and bustle of the slavers' market through the trees.